Welcome to B2B Tech Mindset, where we explore how technology drives business success. Join us as we discuss the latest software solutions, trends, and strategies that can help you stay ahead of the curve. Develop a tech mindset and learn how to leverage technology for growth in your organization.
And welcome back to a new episode of the Tech Mindset podcast. And today we are going to discuss Agile. And Agile is an interesting subject. I recall that when I began my journey here in Germany in gaming, we were doing Scrum pretty early on. At the beginning, we had a mess. It was kind of crazy. And then at some point, we decided that we wanted to have Scrum, and we had a burn down chart and all these tasks. And then we had a meeting, a stand-up meeting every single morning. And for a while, it seemed that we had a structure in the project and it might work. And everyone was pretty confident that by having this super structured way of operating, things will work pretty well. But then the project was canceled, and my big lesson, the project was canceled because it was going nowhere, et cetera, et cetera. There was some other reasons for that, but it happens often in the game industry. But for me, the main takeaway was that Agile doesn't guarantee the success of a project. And I will leave it. No. I will leave it there, and I will let you build on top of that, because many people use Agile as a religion. And I want to start it with this, with this experience that I had. And then I also experienced many other projects that were not Agile and were successful. So for that, I get started like that, and then you build on top of that.
There are a lot of people that get the Scrum book and swear by it on the top, with the right hand on top of the Scrum book. So basically, that you're using an Agile methodology in your company, that will be Scrum, Kanban, Hola Crazy, whatever thing we're using. It doesn't guarantee any success at all. At most, it gives you a common structure that everybody can operate with, like the teams can operate with. In some complex contexts, like you have multiple teams, then you can actually synchronize those teams in the same cadence using Scrum, using like high-level Scrum. So all the teams are doing a Scrum, when you are doing like a high-level cadence of a Scrum on top of it. Like everybody have the same sprint size, everybody have the same release dates, everybody have the same retrospective. You can do also a big retrospective, like once a quarter or whatever. But no matter what you're using, it doesn't guarantee success of any project, any product, anything that you are doing. Again, for me, it gives you a structure. I always laugh when other industries that are not software try to be agile in some ways. Like, I don't know, manufacturing. Like you have definitely manufacturing. For me, it's a cascade. You can also do cascade. That's like everybody was doing in the 80s, on the 90s before Scrum. Everybody was doing cascade. It's like you finish one thing and then you go to the next, and then you go to the next, and you go to the next. When you have to actually wait for the previous step to finish to continue the other one. So it was pretty much a disaster to use cascade. But the manufacturing industry is like, you have to have the raw materials, you have to ship the raw materials at some point. This is very difficult to mount all that process, and then put a Scrum process or an Agile process on top of it.
I think the idea of Agile, first, Agile is a pretty cool name. I have to give them that, by saying that we are going to use a process that is agile. Everyone think, at least what I think is a cat. It's like a cat that is jumping. Wow. And and things are gonna work.
Agile.
Yeah, it's agile. So you think someone who's doing a somersault or some gymnastics, something crazy,
Yeah.
or parkour. So that's what crosses my mind. So it's lean, it's fast, energetic,
The
and
word is flexible.
yeah, it's flexible. It's all these attributes that imply that this is going to be with high probability a success. And many of the principles of agile on paper, I mean, and I'm not here to criticize the process. I think that there have been many
No, no, no.
things that work pretty well, and especially in software, it might work because of the nature of software. You can't just throw away all the code that you wrote yesterday if you notice that things just don't work. The same thing doesn't apply to manufacturing, at least not in the same extent. It's true that today manufacturing, you have VR, and you have prototyping in VR, and you have digital twins, and you can kind of run in a similar experience, but still it's not the same thing. But I have to, again, going back to the name, I have to give them that the name of Agile is a pretty cool marketing decision, because it really builds this image in everyone's mind. I think one thing that I learned, that, for instance, the idea of Kanban and this continuous improvement that comes from Toyota, and this Japanese mentality, this Shinkansen mentality of continuous improvement. If you improve, this philosophy that if you improve 1% every single day and you are disciplined about that, well, 1% every day, it compounds exponentially over a year. And if your teams have the discipline and the tenacity to build that way, then probably it's going to be very successful. But the most important thing is the discipline of the team and also the leadership of the team. And I don't know to what extent you see that in today's application of Agile.
Well, let's start making the difference between, like, for me, the difference between Scrum on Kanban is like Scrum is a push method, so you're pushing task, like your product owner or your Scrum master or whatever is like pushing tasks in the weekly planning to the team. So the team have to decide in the weekly planning what they want to do for the sprint. In the sprint planning, sorry, not the weekly planning, the sprint planning. On Kanban, if more like a pool, you have a backlog, you have hopefully a prioritized and organized backlog. And the team is, depending on the capacity, is the pulling tasks for the backlog into the Kanban board and actually working this way along the way. That implies in software that you have a continuous release, continuous deployment, and all that stuff that you need, also infrastructure for that. So like your release and go-to-market process has to be also be done according to the agile method that you are using. So that's for me, very personally, the two difference. I want to go back a little bit what you say about agile on the Lux cat, like jumping in the air or whatever. It's like it actually give you certain flexibility that you need. Like you are compartmenting your work in, like, let's say in Scrum, like 2-week sprints is nowadays standard. And for sure after the 2 weeks, sorry, you will gonna have something to release, right? And if you release something in 2 weeks, and you realize that the market changed, then you can actually reorganize the backlog and do the next sprint totally different as the one that you did before, and focus on urgent stuff. I don't know if you have an escalation for a customer that they find something that is not working quite as expected, you can introduce that in the next sprint without waiting to the whole process. Like you can prioritize that, estimate, and introduce that into the next sprint. without too much hassle. So in that way is very flexible. Because if you have a cowboy style, we used to call it in my first company here in Germany, what we didn't have anything, no Kanban, no Scrum, no nothing. It's a cowboy style. Like everybody was doing what they knew they have to do. That is a little bit more difficult to plan for these changes in the market or the product or the landscape.
Yeah, that's true. Again, I mean, what I found interesting about the whole agile story is that, at least in theory, I recall when we were doing it, and from what you're saying, I mean, I've not been doing agile development for years now, because the teams I've been working, especially in the analytics world, they some use some form of agile, but usually it's not something that comes up very often. But nevertheless, the experience that I had was that, yes, the workload get structured, and where I saw that the most value was generated was actually in the process of assessing risk during the sprint. So how do you align your resources, or how do you distribute your resources according to the things that are more important, and that the risk is measurable, that you can really understand, well, we can really get this thing done, or we can't get this thing done, therefore we are going to split it in smaller things. And the ability to get that assessment, that risk assessment, from the people, from the team members that are actually going to execute the task, that I found powerful at the time. But besides that, I mean, but that led to really long discussions that, obviously you have techniques like time boxing. You decide, well, we are going to use so and so much time discussing this, and we are use so and so much time trying to accomplish this task. If not, then we pivot and we do something else. But it was, at some stages, it was draining for me. I don't know what is the stand. What is people doing today? Has that changed? How is the whole risk assessment? How people prioritize things today when they're using any of these agile techniques?
Well, basically in all my companies, after the first company that we started using Scrum back in the day, after what I've been always in a Scrum team or a Kanban team or whatever Agile methodology we were using, so I'm pretty familiar with that. What you were saying about assessing the risk is basically the estimation. So you can estimate how much the task will last, if the task fit in the sprint, or you have to divide the task in two to fit in 2 sprints, so you have to put all the effort of the team in that task or whatever. So estimation is also where you are saying that the discussions happened very, very long. So yeah, that's true. That will depend on the team, on how the politics of the company, the team, the product, the LOB, whatever is also happen. It's also political stuff. Like the estimation is also political stuff, because it's basically a negotiation between the development team on the counterpart, I mean management, product management, etc., into what to deliver by the end of the sprint. And they can be stuff like, usually product management on management are not technical people, in my experience. So they have to rely on the estimations that the development team give them to actually approve or not, and say, yeah, we prioritize. If you can deliver that in this sprint, then we have to prioritize. If you cannot deliver, then we have a problem, whatever. It's a lot of politics there. What Agile actually, particularly Scrum, with all these ceremonies, I mean, like sprint planning at the beginning of the planning, like daily meetings every day, retrospective, like release meeting, etc., demo, spring demo. So all those ceremonies that Scrum bring itself to the process are actually very good to communicate. Because I'm going to put you on a very simple example, like the daily meeting. Daily meeting is a maximum 15 minutes where everybody say what they did yesterday, what they are going to do today, and if they are blocked. So there is a very, very, very important question. If they are blocked, because that will solve the problem that before if someone was blocked when he was not communicating, that was blocked, he was blocked for days, and there was no way to actually solve that blocker and actually move forward with that development or that stream of development. Right now, since all the team is in the daily meeting, when somebody say you're blocked, then everybody has the opportunity to actually find a solution altogether. Usually you find a solution pretty quickly, or you shift the focus. Okay, you're blocked on this, you're waiting on external information that has nothing to do with this team, then you can focus on this task. When you shift the focus to other things, so it's a lot more agile in that information exchange in that way. That is something very, very positive that I find it all the time.
That's it's fascinating to hear from you that has not changed in 15 years. and it's still I hear all over the place that people find that really innovative when they are, and I'm wondering, is not there, I mean, have been any improvements to the methodology in the last I don't know, 10 years? Like this is there anything new that has happened there?
Well, me personally, since the last years I have, it's me who is actually driving the process as Scrum process, right? Because we are working like with a development team who have also a Scrum process, so we basically align parallel with what they are doing most of the time. And in my case, I can get rid of some ceremonies. Like I only need today like one meeting at the beginning of the week, one meeting at the end of the week. So I can get rid of the dailies. We don't have demos, spring demos, because we do have actually ad hoc reviews with product management and with development. So it's kind of a demo for us. Like we do the design and then we demo the design to the other people all the time. So to get feedback and to solve problem stuff. So that's why we actually don't have demos. And I will do maybe one or two retrospective a year, but not by the book. Like, yeah, what went well, what went bad, what can be improved, and all that thing that retrospective gives. So, but I like to do it in a more informal way. Like, I will ask like anonymously to all the people in the team, like, what is bothering you, what went bad, what went good, etc. But from their perspective, and they can actually take the time or write the thing anonymously, and then I can digest that information basically. But yeah, you can streamline the Scrum process as much as you want, like I do, when it's actually pretty comfortable. Like I don't bother my team with, oh, you have to have this ticket in this ticket system with this structure. You have to be worried that to close it in the sprint, because otherwise the churn rate or the burn rate or whatever that is will get decreased. So, but no, I don't bother my team with that stuff. Like they have to do work on, then of course we have tickets, of course we have a ticket system, of course we move the tickets across the board, but that is secondary, it's not like primary.
Yeah, because I noticed what I learned when we were building software using that methodology is that some really interesting game theory dynamics began to arise when people began to make pressure to put pressure on the team, in the development team, in the estimation, because then people begin to overestimate things by default. So if they knew that in sprint one they fell short, then they will overestimate in the next sprint, and then they will try to oversell every single thing they do to the stakeholders. So if you had a product manager that was coming to the meeting, they will say, no, 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 that task takes forever. And and then really weird games begin to happen, like loss of trust and people trying to negotiate those things. And that's why I think it's a fine line to walk for everyone to make it actually work and to have estimates that make really sense. It's like those burn down charts. I mean, yeah, they are kind of good, but the I think the main challenge is that the metrics that you are observing there are generated by the team, and and it's the subjective estimation of the team, and that's not always helpful. I guess that there are ways to apply analytics to the whole mix and to have a more accurate estimation of how fast things are gonna really get done. But I don't even think that's the objective of many teams. So people, I guess, they don't really want to be that accurate. They just want to have a process that runs and people feel they have a cadence. But yeah, I saw this very strange game theory driven behaviors in teams, people behaving in funny ways just to get their way in the
Yeah.
process. Yeah.
And there is also like feature creep, like the team agrees to do X amount of features in this sprint, and then the managers or project manager come at the middle of the sprint with, oh, this is urgent, we need to do this also as well. So it brings a lot of stress to the team as well. So that also happened. But I will recommend, if you want to measure the what you are doing, don't measure it by line of code, don't measure it by feature release, because you don't know if the feature that you're releasing, like if there is something that your customer need. Hopefully you did the research before. What you are building now to release tomorrow is something that the user needs. So hopefully that's the best case scenario. Unfortunately, it's not always that simple, but I will focus on measuring actually by the end user. Go ask the end user if what you are releasing on the piece that you are releasing is enough. And if they say it's not, then go back and change something at the beginning. So don't try to measure, oh, we have an excellent process because our burn rate or whatever metric you are using for your Scrum Agile thing is right. But at the end of the day, you are releasing like meaningless features that are the ones that you actually fit into the sprint, like changing a color here or changing size there. And that is your whole sprint when you release that. That doesn't make sense, for in my opinion. So it's make more sense like measuring actually the impact of the feature that you're releasing with your end users.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, because now when you were discussing that subject of how what to optimize for, I was thinking, well, if you are in one organization that is building a product and is also going to operate that product, because there are teams that are building software that is going to be sold to an end customer, and then they are not going to operate that software, so the business is different. They are not um, actually operating that. But if they do, then I think it's important that all parts of the team play together And what I mean of the team, not only the team that's doing Scrum, but all the different parts of the organization are playing together. That, I think that's the fundamental part, because say that you're releasing a new feature because you were planning something, then you run an A/B test because you are not sure, or the product manager is not sure if people is going to like the red or the blue button. And then you have to run an A/B test, and suddenly you decide, oh no, people like this kind of behavior. And then you need this loop, this feedback loop that has to drive somehow what people is doing in the development team. And also you see other things like FinOps, looking that team is also aware of the financial load that the development is causing, or that when that software is going to production, what is the impact? How is that related with the amount of cash that we have? How much is that related to the cash flow that we have? How much are we burning? How does that express us in terms of how productive, how agile are we in terms of pivoting, changing direction? So if teams are building something that they're operating afterwards, it gets pretty interesting. And I think this goes back to the idea of the lean startup and all this lean philosophy. But it can get pretty complex. And I think in many aspects it's work in progress. I've been lately reading some data engineering material, pretty recent, and they were looking at all these aspects. And it's interesting that slowly, for instance, the data engineering world, I mean, not slowly, not too recently, but it's moving towards this agile kind of development. But still, you see that there are there's a lot of friction in many components there, because it's hard to have these short release cycles. Especially, for instance, one scenario that I see that Agile is particularly complicated is in the data science teams. Because in data science, you are doing more something like research and development. So it's pretty hard sometimes to estimate how fast are you going to be able to solve problem X. And sometimes it's not simple to decompose a task in smaller tasks. So, and that's one space that, at least in the past, I noticed that it was kind of hard. Now you have technologies like AutoML, and you have processes that you can say, well, you know what, I will throw at my problem all these machine learning models, and I have an automated way of doing this, and therefore I could have an estimation of how long it's going to take to find a model that is feasible for the problem that I'm trying to solve. And then you have things like ML ops that help you to support that process. But I don't think Agile, or particularly these Agile methodologies, not always map really well the things that teams are trying to accomplish or organizations are trying to accomplish. And sometimes I see it's kind of forced into it. Like, okay, let's split what we're doing in sprints. Let's do these meetings. Let's have measure whatever we want to measure. But it's kind of forced into the nature of the problem. So that's something that I've noticed, especially when one goes beyond normal software development and just building a product.
Yeah. Well, it also doesn't mix, like Scrum doesn't mix that well with design, because design is a creative process. So you have to iterate, you have to come up with many ideas and then test those ideas and see which one works better. And after you have that feedback, maybe you change to one of the original idea, you mix two. So basically, the more time you have, the better the design gets in the end. But if you have a constraint of 2 weeks to finish one feature, then you will end up with a compromise. Same goes for development. If you are throwing a very, very complex thing to the development team, they have to finish in 2 weeks. They're gonna take shortcuts, and they're gonna increase like the technical debt. At the end of the day, at the end of the sprint, they're gonna release something that works, but they will have a lot of hacks and a lot of technical depth in there. Same with design. If you have constraints, time constraints, you will deliver a compromise, not the best solution at all.
Yeah,
So
that's kind of like the challenge that I see, that sometimes it's being forced into scenarios that it doesn't always map that well. Like for instance, if you are building an e-commerce product, Agile probably is going to work really well. But if you are writing software for a microcontroller, for the chip that an airplane needs that cannot fail,
yes.
then waterfall might probably be the way to go, because you want to make sure that that thing really works. Like if you are building, the design of an ASIC chip to run machine learning embedded in silicon, Agile, is it really the right solution for the problem? I'm not really sure.
I'm not really sure there
I'm not really sure. So I think, yes, many people wanted to like translate that to other domains. And I think because to be honest, most of the software that is being written is CRUD operations. So you are creating, reading, updating, deleting stuff from a database.
Yeah.
You have a front end. You have pretty standard architectures. You can use a template from somewhere and then take it to your project, and it's going to work. And most of those cases, yes, you can make an estimation, and yes, you can be agile, because at the end of the day, what you're tweaking is color, design, layout, that sort of thing. And it might work.
Most of the products,
Yeah, most of the products. I mean, if you are in e-commerce, or particularly e-commerce, which is
e-commerce is all the same.
It's a big chunk of what people do.
The front store changes.
Or if you are in app development or mobile app development, that sort of scenario. If you are building, for instance, also enterprise software, which essentially is moving data from A to B and doing some transformation and putting there, and then going back and doing some other stuff, and then moving the
some
data
calculations in between.
Yeah, that stuff, like, probably you are fine using Agile. If you are going to other domains, again, my favorite example is always, the chips that an airplane is going to use, or a rocket. It's like, well,
there is also there is also medical software or medical hardware. Like, you have to be very careful with that. Like transportation, like cars and stuff. Like, there is also lighting. You don't want your light bulb to explode over your head when you connected it. So there's a lot of stuff that actually use very simple software that is actually very risky. So that's why I do like Kanban more than Scrum. Because in Kanban, you can take the time to move like one feature from one extreme of the board to the other, when you actually take all the time you need to finish that feature in the right way. So in a concrete situation, like you are in a pretty standard situation, software development, you have your product management team. They start writing the features in a Kanban way. When they are finished, they move that to the backlog of the designers. The designer picks from that backlog. They design the features. They move that feature to the bucket in the development, and then they just take it. Of course, in one of the steps of the Kanban, there will be like reviews and whatever. And after that, they can release only that feature. That will be part of the so-called continuous release. So, right, like, you don't have to release like every month, at the end of the month of every Monday or whatever. You can do actually continuous release all the time. That will be, for me, my ideal scenario. That's why, if in all the places that I have the luxury of selecting the way of work that my team will do, that will be Kanban all the way down.
Yeah, Kanban is it's kind of funny. It comes from the Toyota factory methodology, right? I mean, I think And again, I mean, they had this because I was interested in that subject for a while, where the whole thing came from, and again, it was this incremental improvement. And thing is that it got distorted into this. In German, you say Laufbahn. How you say that in English? It's the
Oh, production line.
yeah, production line.
Yeah.
And it's this production line way of operating that you just people keep getting tasks and people begin to produce, and that's fine. That's cool. But I think the main idea, or the original idea, when you go and read kind of like the annals, the where the whole thing comes from, is this incremental improvement. And the question is, have you experienced teams that try to focus on that try to get better and better over time, that they look at themselves and they see, well, how can we optimize here and there?
Yeah, I mean, to a certain extent, all the team does that. If any user discover a bug, then you put that into your backlog, and you fix that, and you release that bug fix. That is actually an incremental improvement. But if you follow like the Kanban methodology, like every day you can have your 1% incremental improvement, because you're releasing a new feature or a bug fix or something else that would actually increase the quality of the product somehow. So it's the principle that you're talking about this incremental improvement, constant improvement, is actually there. So it's actually there also in Kanban, in Scrum. Sorry, in Scrum is also there, like, but in more bigger chunks. Like you release a bunch of stuff at the end of the 2 weeks.
But how people know that they are improving?
Well, to know that you are improving, you have to measure.
What do they measure?
As I was saying in a chapter before, and was saying a couple of minutes before, it's like you go and actually you see what your end users are doing. If you are using telemetry on analytics of the behavior or the usage, not the behavior, the usage of your user with your software. So how long that takes to complete these tasks, or how often they use a feature, or how is the completion rate, how is the success rate, like if they do it right, if they have to break it in the beginning and start all over the game because they forgot something or they didn't understand something. So basically, it's analyzing how your users are using your product, and how well or bad is your product helping the user to use your product. Actually, it's measuring that. That's actually a good way to see if you are releasing the right features. Like, for instance, if you release something and after 1 month, like nobody click on that menu option, then you basically wasted all that money. So nobody's using it.
That would be a way to measure things. I mean, by usage. But I was also thinking, because but it's much, it's more complex than that, because I'm thinking about the case. Well, up to what extent is the development team, which is the one that is being measured by the whole agile process, responsible for a feature being built or not? So they get from some stakeholders, this is what we want, this is what we think that we should have, and then the feature is not being used. It might be that technically the implementation of that feedback is flawless. There's no problem. Like from the craft, from the point of view of how well the engineers are building the product, there is nothing to complain about. However, the feature was not being used. So there is a mismatch, if you will, between what you measure and the craft that the engineers are having. And I think an aspect that is also interesting is that, for instance, product design is less influenced by this continuous improvement, because their cycle to measure these things is much bigger. You know, you have a Scrum team that is going to have a software delivery every 2 weeks, right? You decide that your sprint length is going to be 2 weeks, so you're going to have, you know, you're going to put in production something pretty soon. Now, how does product development thinks about that? And I think one of the reasons that probably, and you know, it's interesting as a reflection that the projects I was involved that were using Scrum were not that successful, was that we were developing that software in a vacuum. Especially the game we were trying to build, we were building the game in the vacuum, so we were not really releasing to players, but we were releasing to some stakeholders in the company. And that was not real feedback, like real life feedback, because there was, again, this disconnect between the craft, what we are doing, and the feature set that we have that is not the same thing. And I think to me, it feels a little bit that they are two parallel tracks that they're running. They're somehow connected, you know, they are somehow in synchrony, but they don't have the same period, how you say that, period or periodicity. I think periodicity
Cadence.
is the right physical name. Yeah.
Or cadence, yeah.
Yeah. So that's for me one of the challenge, that usage of a feature doesn't mean that the craft itself was wrong. Not necessarily.
No. The feature can be like made pristine with no technical debt, no bugs, whatever. Like the team did a very good job, but also from the design.
And in fact, if you have things like DevOps, you are really making sure that every time that you commit, that everything that you commit is clean. You know, you don't break anything. You have functional tests. You have all your unit tests. You deploy the whole thing. So you know, like technically, you know, it's going to work. So how does that match the whole product development story? How Agile influences that other part?
Well, you can have like 100% test coverage, but if the feature that you have in your product are crap, when nobody's using your feature, that doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. And that comes, but then we are a little bit higher in the product development sphere, like thing that will be like backlog prioritization, product strategy, etc., which usually is not done by product development, not often. Like you have your managers, you have your, probably if you are a small company, you have your CEO who decide the product strategy, and after that you have a couple of project or product management, you name that depending on the organization that you are, but it's basically kind of the same. When they actually go to the product, they prioritize what the product needs to do next, or the feature set that it needs to build. Hopefully talking to clients with a whole set of information that they should have, they prioritize the backlog, basically. And then the development team gets from the backlog and actually release that, like deliver that. And then is the task on the craft of the product / PM project management to basically do the right thing at the right moment. So
that's interesting. Again, I mean, I'm trying to wrap my head around it, because I think this is where probably this methodology marries agile as a, I mean, not agile, but the lean customer, or a lean development in general. I think this is where the two things come together at some point. But to me, at least to me, the bridge is not that clear. I think, like I recall I had this colleague of mine, he was telling, well, there are some product teams, or that they make the decisions is ego driven. So it's like, oh, I try to convince everyone that feature makes sense, not because I have evidence, but because I can talk really loud. As I can be really loud in the discussion, and
Yeah.
and many times I think, well, how is Agile complements the other functions, so the whole organization is lean, so the whole organization moves fast. Because at the end of the day, lean in that context is a little bit a synonym of Agile. I mean, if something is lean, semantically,
Yeah.
chances are
It's
that it's
lean, it's
also
easy
going
to
to be,
share, it's flexible. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Well, at least it goes where the wind blows. That's, at least that, or where the stream takes it. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
but that's for me something that it will be interesting to explore a little bit more, to trying to understand. Okay, well, imagine that now you have this pristine developer team that does everything, it is perfect, and then how does that translate to the other part of the company? How people make the best use out of that, so all the whole organization is agile. It's like, is there a way to be agile, say at the meta evening, meta layer, you would say
The
in
mental
English?
level. Well, again, it depends on the product strategy. So the higher you get in the organization, the longer the cycle gets. Like when you go up, then in the organization, then people are thinking in quartals or not in sprints, for instance. So the higher you get it in the organization, the longer these cycles get, because the connection with the day-to-day work get a little bit less. So you can have your CEO thinking in like yearly goals or quarter goals. You can have your controlling on HR thinking about quarter goals, and you have then your development team thinking about Scrum on releases and versions of, which is a very a more faster way. So to for the strategy to reflect in the day-to-day development is where I have to say a lot of companies have a lot of problem doing that. Like for the management, so the high management, the upper management part of the team, like communicating the strategy in a clear way that actually the last developer know what they are doing is actually speaks. It's one part of that strategy. So that is pretty difficult to achieve. Even in small companies, from my opinion, it's pretty difficult to achieve because you have so many layers in there. So, and what you were saying, like the whose decision is what it comes into the sprint or not. So, from my experience, you can have like one product owner or scrum master that actually is in charge of prioritizing on grooming the backlog all the time. So it's doing research with the customers, it's doing research on the market. Is actually the backlog is at all time prioritized. So in the next sprint, you get the more urgent stuff at the top. So in other contexts or other organization, like on the sprint planning, the whole team, like you have the backlog, which is unorganized. When you make the whole team go to all the features or actually prioritize the one that the whole team again thinks that are important for the product. At that point, it takes a lot of knowledge from the team for the product, for the market, for the end customers. The whole team had to have a lot of knowledge to operate in that situation. So usually it's easier and cheaper and faster to have a product owner, scrum master, to do that job, to prioritize and organize the backlog.
But still, that belongs to the team, to the team that is implementing implementing things. But I was thinking, well, is it possible to extrapolate how this works to the whole organization? Like imagine that you have a set of goals, and you say, well, we as an organization, we want to accomplish this in 2 weeks, and then we run a sprint where all the different players are involved, and then this cascades in different hierarchies. It's like, you have this layer organizes, and then this layer cascades. Is that a model that might work for some people, or is that something that is not feasible?
I don't think so. It will work for the whole company because the, it works for small teams because the product manager, the Scrum Master is chopping stuff or making like in doable pieces, right? So you have to have from the top level, you get the strategy, like the example. You say, okay, let's increase, put it very simple. Let's gain 10,000 customers this sprint, right? This is a pretty it is a goal. Like you can enunciate, doesn't mean that you can't achieve. You can enunciate that. But then you have to have, even though the same people who are enunciating that goal, to divide it that in what really means for every part of your organization. So for HR, that means that we need like 2 new people to take care of the sales, for instance, and then you have to hire those people. And what mean for development? Well, that means that you need to deliver that on that feature. So you have to translate that goal into actual actionable items for other part of the organization to do. And again, that is actually the problem. Like most organizations cannot articulate that pretty well, top to bottom. So like a lot of information get lost in between, and then you get a bunch of middle management who actually start doing their interpretation of the goal, so what they think they should do, which is actually the 90% of the cases what people expect. Like the CEO of the company expect, like if they say, okay, let's increase like our customer base by 10,000 in 2 weeks, they expect like the other managers below him or her like figure it out in themselves what they need to do to achieve that goal. It's as simple as that, but that doesn't work in the in the day to day.
Yeah, no, it seems that is. I guess that's the reason why Agile is, at the end of the day, the business of being an Agile coach is such a profitable one, because I think there's always room for discussion and trying to, and I mean, not pun intended, but to evangelize people while they're doing this, because this uh, Scrum, I mean, Agile in general, I mean, has this really, I mean, you're working with people, you're trying to align people, and then it's trying to make people come in the flow, and that everyone behaves in a predictable manner, and people get sort of educated into
Yes.
how they get productive. But I guess one good thing that speaks about the methodology, and I sound probably a little bit skeptic about it, but I have to admit that one strength is that it is ubiquitous, so it's almost everywhere, and probably that's testament of the fact that yes, it is effective, and there are many success cases that support the fact that, yeah, well, if you use Agile, you probably are going to have you're going to elevate your chances of success in whatever endeavor you're doing that involves software, at least software development. So I think that's the best that's the best way to assess, at least for me, that's the best way to assess that the method is working for most people, because most people get, keep doing it. And I see it like when we began to play with it, again, that was 2009. And there were not many teams playing with that. And again, it was in the game industry, which in the game industry, you take a lot of risks and you try new things. But now you see it in actually in big enterprise companies that are not IT companies. So that's the way that their IT teams operate now. And to me, well, it's again, with being under the risk of repeating myself, is a proof that the whole thing seems to be working.
Yeah. I mean, it's a framework with a lot of advantage for a lot of people. Like in theory, for the developers, like they commit to something and they kind of be sure that they don't get like knock on the door at the next day, oh, you need to do also this and this and that. So it's basically, okay, I have this fixed amount of work that I can do in 2 weeks, and that's it. I will do it in 2 weeks. For management, in the other hand, there is an assurance and a commitment that they're going to get something by the end of the sprint in 2 weeks. And if they don't get something, then they can analyze on why they didn't get something. But at least they have, like, instead of running around and asking every individual developer when this feature will be ready, they get a commitment that they're going to get something in after 2 weeks. And that's also why a lot of organizations like Scrum, because they like to have that certainty, when I put like air quotes on it, that they're going to get like something at the end of the 2 week. And that is actually how they measure if people are doing their work or not. Which for me is the wrong way to do it. But a lot of people is that, okay, you deliver the feature no matter how at the end of the sprint, and that is what counts. It doesn't matter if you have to jump a lot of hurdles and do a lot of technical dev, if the feature is buggy, if the design is a compromise, or the feature is wrong because you don't even have time to test it, for instance. But you deliver something. That is for a lot of managers will say like the more important thing. Like, okay, we committed to this in the 2 weeks, and here's this thing that we did in 2 weeks. It doesn't matter, but we did it. So here it is.
Well, I think that's kind of fair, because what people need to understand is that the definition of customer is very fluid. If you are in an organization that you are creating a delivery for department X, and department X sells that to the end customer, still your customer is department X if you're building something that department X is going to use. I know it sounds kind of abstract, but I think that's important to understand those dynamics, because sometimes, and again, that goes back to what we were discussing previously about, the feature that you requested is perfect, but no one is buying it. Well, that was not my problem. My customer, which is the stakeholder, said, I want this, I delivered this. So he paid me whatever currency he's going to pay me back, say trust, confidence, whatever it is. And then the stakeholder that I delivered this piece of software then is going to give it, it's going to forward this to the end customer, and perhaps the end customer decides, yeah, this is what I want, or this is not what I want. And in that chain of command, so to speak, then the one that might go broke is the is the stakeholder, is not you, but by extension, at some point you also get broke. but it's like you can reframe things and see them in that way, that you think, well, you know what, actually my stakeholders are my customers, and they just demand this from me. They want this product. I'm delivering that to them, and it's up to them to sell it to someone else.
Yeah.
Which reminds me of something that we wanted to also talk at some point here, like a DAO, a distributed autonomous organization, because that would be actually a pretty good way of building things in some organizations. It's like,
that is a different animal. Yeah,
that's a different animal. But if I'm building something and then I give it to you, and you are not, this is the wrong thing to build, doesn't matter that I build it properly. But if it's decentralized, you're paying me for that, and then it's up to you to deliver the thing. Well, perhaps people have more skin in the game, and by having more skin in the game, they make more sensible decisions.
Yeah. Basically, I haven't seen. So one thing I wanted to say, I forget it till now, is like your customer doesn't care what type of methodology you're using. Your customer cares about the quality of your product. So that is the end goal. So that have to be clear. On other thing is like the products I have seen failing is not by the methodology you're using or whatever, is because other products have a better market fit. So that's how the product that fails, because other product comes and actually take their market share with a better market fit strategy, better features or faster feature or easy features for the same users. So those are the products that fail. I don't see product failing because they are using Agile or Kanban in the wrong or the right way.
Well, but you can argue that their ability to react and adapt to the demands of the market depends on how fast you can pivot, and that's a consequence, or you can make the claim that is a consequence of using an agile methodology that allows you to pivot, say, every 2 weeks, because now you reprioritize the things that you observe that in the market there is demand for.
Yeah. That's absolutely right. If you are able to foresee or see or read the signals the right way.
Yeah, so that's what I think. It's perhaps the unique selling proposition. But again, if you are in a scenario that you are building something, and that something you're building is not, you are not presenting that to the end user, then you run the risk of not getting the most value of the process. I mean, if your release cycle is
once a year,
once a year, and I don't even mean like internal releases, because some companies have internal release cycles, then they have internal test groups, and they give feedback. So I don't even mean that. I mean, if no one is going to use the product for, say, 6 months, and then that's your release cycle, but still you're using sprints of 2 weeks, I think there's no real point on going that path. I think you get the most value of the whole thing of the agile methodology when you are battle testing your product. And by battle testing, I mean you're presenting that to the end customer, they're using it, they're giving feedback. If possible, you're actually measuring how they're using the features that you developed, and then you reiterate on that. But we know that that's not always possible. It's not always feasible. But that would be the ideal scenario, at least for me.
And also going back to the lean startup thing, methodology is like, if you're going to fail fast, so that you know that you failed, you can pivot, you can change stuff, you can modify and tweak stuff. So basically, if you want to just release the thing that you are developing as fast as possible, so you get feedback as fast as possible, and you can improve it in time. So that, for me, is a very good way to actually maintain this market fit that I was talking before, that some companies and some product lose. It's like actually keeping releasing stuff with velocity and keep like getting feedback from the customers.
Yeah, I think we've covered a lot. We already, I
Yeah.
think we went over the 50 minutes mark. It's an interesting subject because it's at the core of how many things, many products that are, especially enterprise products are being built. Even if enterprise products don't tend to have really short release cycles, like it
No, very
usually
few, very
very,
few.
very few. That's true. So it's an interesting subject, and many companies use it. It's at the core of how they build software. But I think the really interesting thing will be how close you get that, or how integrated it is with the whole ecosystem. But it's been a fun conversation. It's especially for me to realize that it has not changed that much in the last
Nothing has changed in the last
15
15
years.
years in
It's
in that
insane.
front. I mean, the software that you use for that change, actually not much, because we're still using the same software. So
Pretty much so.
yeah. It's basically the same thing. It's the same name, by the way.
I,
Although
I
nothing changed. Yeah.
I think what is a little bit more mature now is the whole DevOps. I mean, we also had DevOps in the past. We had
Yeah.
all that, but now I noticed that those tools are much more refined, and you also have containers, containerization, and you have management of containers, and there are many more abstraction layers to the whole game.
Yeah.
And at that time, I recall it was the beginning of that journey, but besides that, not really much has changed in a significant manner. So it's
No. Yeah, I mean, continuous deployment or continuous releases have improved. Like the tech to do that have improved a lot in the last year. That changed, but the methodology to work like Scrum, Kanban. I mean, we haven't talked about the other ones like Crazy and all the other methodologies that companies are using. They're also out there, but they are a minority. Maybe we do an episode on that as well, like
yeah,
alternative to not standard, but how do you say, classic agile.
yeah, that's definitely something we can also touch on.
Yeah.
So I think with that, we want to wrap this up, and then, as usual, like this thing, share it, write comments if you have any, because that is feedback that we get, and then we can keep working on that. We want to improve what we are doing, want to improve the content. So if you have feedback, if you have any ideas that we can implement or we should do, then please let it somewhere in the comment, give it a like, share it, tell your friends, and then see you next week. Today,
All
see
right.
you. Bye-bye.
See you next week. Bye-bye.